There's nothing he or anyone else can do to stop us.
Invincible is easily one of the best comic books out there, and while the show did an amazing job adapting it, Season 4 pretty much outdid its predecessors by expanding the pre-existing lore in terms of gore, violence, intensity, power scaling, and emotional quotient. I absolutely loved how Robert Kirkman added new scenes and storylines exclusively for the show, while also not deviating too much from the main source material. Having said that, after the very reluctant truce between Thragg and Mark in order to stop the Viltrumite War before both sides are annihilated, everyone is wondering what would happen next. Well, worry not, because Season 5 has already gone into production and is set to release sometime near April 2027, meaning we won't have to wait more than a year to watch the Graysons in action again. Even then, a year is a very long waiting period. So without wasting another moment, let's discuss our top 6 predictions about what will happen in Invincible Season 5. Alan will choose to go forward with Thaddeus' plan. As you know, the end credits of the Season 4 finale hit us with a glimpse of Alan as the Coalition of Planets' new leader. After an intense meeting with all the planet leaders, we see Alan receive a pre-recorded message from Thaddeus, instructing him to find the failsafe plan in case they lose the Viltrumite War. According to Thaddeus, the only way to end the Viltrumite tyranny was by unleashing the perfected version of the Scourge virus on them in order to end the race once and for all. Now, in the comics, after Nolan and Debbie reach Telescria on the spaceship sent to them by Alan, they reunite with Oliver. Eventually, when Alan chats with Nolan, he reveals how he has been considering using the Scourge virus on Earth in order to end the Viltrum race, even if that came at the cost of unleashing the virus upon the humans. Of course, Nolan was disgusted by Alan's decision, and had no other option but to fight him in order to stop him. Initially, Alan allows Nolan to beat him, but at the end, Alan ends up injuring him right before Oliver arrives to find out what's actually happening. As Alan arrests Nolan, Oliver also reluctantly agrees with his plan to unleash the Scourge virus on the Viltrumites and offers to travel with him to Earth. Even if Nolan tries to stop Alan by claiming how the Viltrumites would inevitably change after experiencing the human notion of love, Alan disagreed, as he believes Nolan was the only exception. Of course, watching Alan make such a diabolical decision to consider wiping away humanity in order to kill 37 Viltrumites would be awful, but to be honest, he makes the decision mostly under the job pressure, with all Coalition leaders continuously pressuring him about the remaining Viltrumites and considering him to be a weak leader as compared to Thaddeus, sort of pushed him to make a harsh decision, believing that's what his predecessor would do. But I'm still excited to see how the show handles this temporary fallout between Nolan and Alan. Mark will get infected by the Scourge virus. While Alan did ask his forces to restrain Nolan before leaving for Earth alongside Oliver, Nolan broke out and charged for Oliver. However, Alan intervened and sent him flying away. Alan and Oliver then meet up with Mark, where he also expresses his disgust after learning about Alan's plans. Mark even mentions what Alan was aiming to do to humans was exactly the same as what the Viltrumites did to his people. When Alan defends his case by calling it a decision made for the greater good, Mark attacks him. However, Mark is restrained by Oliver, and just like that, we see them all get into an unwilling fight. At that point, Thragg shows up to help Mark in the fight, much to the trio's surprise. Apparently, Thragg somehow found out about the plan, and when Alan showed him the virus dispenser, the Viltrumite leader proposed a truce, because if this conflict continued, they would all have to go back to annihilating one another. That's when Alan finally agrees to the truce. However, just moments later, the Guardians arrive in order to capture Mark on Cecil's orders, and while they were all distracted by the battle, Oliver used this as a window to grab the virus dispenser from Alan and fly straight toward Earth. When Mark tries to stop him, they get into a brief argument and scuffle over Oliver claiming how the loss of human life was nothing in front of the loss of an entire galaxy. Soon, both brothers start a tug-of-war with the dispenser, and before you know it, Oliver accidentally unleashes the virus right on Mark's face. Alan rushes to save Mark, however it's too late, as he's already started bleeding from his eyes and nose. Sadly, the only way to save Mark was to seek Thragg's help, as only Viltrumites knew how to provide the best possible care in case of a Scourge virus infection, and so Mark was quarantined in a Viltrumite warship until he could fully recover. Thragg will try to kill Mark again. While Invincible was recovering from the Scourge virus in Thragg's warship, the Grand Regent went into one of the observation rooms where a scientist working on healing Mark tells him that after testing Mark's blood, his DNA matched with that of Emperor Argal, thus making Nolan the true Emperor of Viltrum, as he is Argal's heir. Well, after finding out about this, Thragg panics and kills the scientist in order to stop the news from spreading. He didn't consider Nolan to be worthy of being the Emperor of Viltrum, especially after his betrayal, and believed that he had earned his position as the leader of the Viltrumites after all the sacrifices he made for thousands of years. Thragg then tried to kill Mark in order to seal any possibilities of having his title revoked, but he was interrupted by Dinosaurus, who hacked his way into Mark's quarters. In order to save Mark, Dinosaurus starts to fight Thragg, only to break his own claws in the process. But luckily, he'd set off explosions around the ship, and even though Thragg managed to shatter his teeth, break his jaw, and damage his head, Dinosaurus still managed to somehow escape with Mark. However, when Eve came in looking for Mark, Thragg blamed Dinosaurus for kidnapping him. This will be a very difficult time for Mark, because even if he does manage to survive the virus, the side effects will cause him to lose his powers and suffer a lot in the process. Nolan will take charge of the Viltrumites. So after losing Mark to Dinosaurus' sudden rampage, Thragg calls for a Viltrumite meeting where he reprimands Craig for not helping out with the Flaxen invasion in London. But Craig reveals he had no choice, as someone in the area was carrying his child. Apparently, Craig has multiple human mates and he loves all of them equally, much to Thragg's disgust. The Grand Regent also rebukes Anissa and Lucan for not obeying his orders before leaving for the other side of the moon, where Nolan and Debbie had set up a base. As they were sharing an intimate moment in the comic, Thragg absolutely loses his shit upon seeing Nolan and pretty much rushes in to attack him. Seeing his wife being launched into space, Nolan rushes to save Debbie by getting her inside an emergency airlock before continuing his battle with Thragg. Initially, he was confused why Thragg broke his own truce, but then Thragg reveals that Nolan is actually Emperor Argal's true son. Apparently, Thragg would not allow Nolan to rule, as he was a traitor, and as it turns out, Nolan had no desire to rule. Even then, Thragg wanted to kill him anyway, and while Nolan refused to fight him, Thragg kept beating him up until Craig stopped him. When Craig, Thula, Lucan, and Anissa ask Thragg why he was trying to kill Nolan, they find out about Nolan's true heritage, and immediately turn on Thragg. As they all fight Thragg and try to kill him, Nolan stops them and orders him to be taken to a holding cell. We then see the four Viltrumites obey Nolan's orders before bowing to him, thus recognizing Nolan as their true emperor. As the new leader of the Viltrumites, Nolan promises to change the Viltrumites' brutal ways and insists they welcome the change from their time on Earth. He then meets Thragg and brings him out to serve out his sentence. While Thragg asks Nolan for a death sentence, the new emperor decides to start his reign with peace, thus exiling Thragg instead of killing him. Given that the show has already established Nolan's father, I don't know how they will connect his lineage to Argal, but I guess they can always present Nolan as Argal's grandson. So there's that. That horrifying Anissa storyline should definitely come with a trigger warning. So Anissa and Mark's paths cross when she helps him take down Dr. Seismic in mere moments. This whole weird encounter ended with Anissa showing her interest in Mark by randomly kissing him and flying away. Anissa would again find Mark and see him for the first time in 6 months after he returned from the alternate dimension, where he was trapped by a robot. She asked him where he'd been, but before Mark could even speak and finish his statement, Anissa stopped him by telling him about the Viltrumite mission of procreating with humans, and how she wasn't doing a very good job on her end. This is when Mark started feeling uncomfortable and tried to leave, but Anissa stopped him. She started telling him about how much she hated the idea of mating with humans, and even though Mark was young and weak, Anissa would not particularly loathe mating with him, especially because of his rich Viltrumite heritage. Of course, Mark outright shot her down and asked her to leave him alone, as he simply was not interested in fighting her. But as it turns out, Anissa wasn't interested in a fight either. She couldn't stall the mission any longer, as Nolan might not be as forceful as Thragg, but still her mission to procreate remained active. Anissa then tried to seduce Mark by coming on to him, but when he refused, she lost her shit and headbutted Mark, while he kept asking her to leave him alone. But Anissa didn't listen and started to fight and chase after him. In fact, she was even enjoying the battle at one point, and when Mark went to punch her in the face, Anissa caught his punch, not noticing how he had grown much stronger than before. That's when she overpowered him, causing the duo to crash onto an unknown farm, with Anissa laying on top of him. What followed next was nothing short of horrifying, as Anissa pushed his arms back and ordered him to stop resisting her. Even though Mark refused to give up, Anissa continued to assault him while pushing her elbow onto his neck. As Mark kept trying to push her away, the Viltrumite reached down to Mark's genitals and then tore off his costume before starting to rape him with her might. At this point, Mark simply could not comprehend what was happening to him and was horrified to watch Anissa getting aroused on top of him. The whole incident left him absolutely floored and traumatized, and he began to cry. But Anissa asked him to man up and told him that it would probably take her a few more tries to get pregnant, thus implying that she would return to try again. She then flew off, leaving Mark to wrap his head around the whole situation. He was very traumatized by the horrifying incident, but couldn't do anything, as he didn't want to mess up the alliance that the Viltrumites had with the Global Defense Agency. Moreover, part of Mark was also ashamed because he didn't know how to process being a guy who was raped. He even hid the whole incident from his father and Adam Eve, which led to him growing distant from her. This is one of the most brutal showcases of Viltrumite mentality in the comics, and is truly a sensitive scene, so I hope the show approaches it with a similar tone, so as to prevent setting a wrong precedent. Dinosaurus will be the ultimate villain in Season 5. So, one of the major stories that the next season will adapt will be the death of everyone, which is the 18th volume of the Invincible comics that covers from issues 97 to 102. Now, while Mark was still recovering from the after effects of surviving the Scourge virus and reeling with the loss of his powers, Dinosaurus set up a bomb in Greenland and Los Angeles. When Mark found out about it, he had the Guardians deactivated, and in retaliation, Dinosaurus teleported there to confront him. After Mark called him insane, Dinosaurus mentions how Los Angeles was simply a distraction. Turns out, he had detonated a bomb in Greenland to flood the major cities around the world, which prompted Mark to battle Dinosaurus. Invincible would have killed him for the sake of humanity, but Dinosaurus ended up capitalizing on Mark's inner ear weakness and played the same sort of frequency that Cecil had used in order to knock him into a coma. He then traded Mark's place with a lifeless clone of him and killed the clone for the whole world to see. After Dinosaurus takes Mark back to his base, he explains how he made the world believe that Mark was dead. But when Mark explained to him how Dinosaurus had caused a disaster based on a maybe, the dude actually agreed. Mark then asked Dinosaurus to help him fix the issue, but the latter refused, saying it would be his final act. Surprisingly enough, he goes on to ask Mark to kill him, and Mark obliges. However, this time Invincible marks Dinosaurus' corpse with his thumb in order to prevent Cecil from faking his death like he'd done with Conquest. Honestly, Dinosaurus is an insane villain, so I'm very excited to witness the new ways that Robert Kirkman reinvents this storyline. Well, that brings us to the very end of this video. Apart from these foolproof predictions, I know for a fact that Nolan and Debbie are definitely getting back together. Not only that, we'll also see Robot and Monster Girl find their way back home after spending 700 years in the Flaxen Empire. Honestly, that's a whole other storyline where Robot ended up being a Flaxen dictator, while Monster Girl led a rebellion against his growing tyranny. Not only that, Monster Girl even had a son with the Flaxen homeworld but had no clue about it. I know, crazy, right? This truly is a topic for a whole other video because, like I said, they spent 700 years in the Flaxen Empire, so truly a whole lot happened. Having said that, what are your theories about Invincible Season 5? Let us know your thoughts in the comment box below.